Broadcasting live from the offices of policebackground.net. This is the Police Applicant Podcast with your host, Ken Roybal.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Police Applicant Podcast. This is our premiere episode. And here with me is Christine Roof. What's happening, Christine?
Hey guys, nothing much, just hanging out. I'm excited.
Yeah, today, this is our premiere episode. It's our very first one. And I'm kind of excited about that. And so what we're going to do is we're going to get Caroline Zavala on the line. And she is a subject matter expert in police oral interviews. So this is going to be kind of cool for me. I've known Carolyn for a long time. I mean, over a decade. And she is good at what she does. She's the other half of policebackground.net. And she does the oral interview prep. So let's get her on the line.
Cool.
Hello.
Hello, Carolyn. It's Ken and Christine.
Hey, Carolyn.
Hello. How are you? Hello, Christine.
We're good. We're good. We are live in the podcast, and we're really happy that you're here. I was telling everybody that you and I have known each other going back many, many years, and I think when did I started in 2006 in backgrounds, and were you there in 2007?
Seven, yes.
2007. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give everybody a little bit of an overview about you. So it's good that you're on the line and you're not live because I'm probably going to make you blush a little bit.
Okay.
So Carolyn started her career in LAPD in July 1996. And I believe you retired in 2020?
2019.
And in July 2007, you went to RED, which is the Recruitment and Employment Division, and you became a mentor. And then later on, you became a recruiter. And the reason that you're here is because you became a subject matter expert for LAPD in the oral interview process. And today, back in the day when you were in LAPD, you were the person that they LAPD sent to when candidates failed the oral interview, and you were the one that helped them pass the oral interview.
Correct.
God bless you, Carolyn.
And Carolyn,
I like doing that. I like helping.
Well, you're outstanding at what you do, which is really cool. So what we have going on today is we want to kind of pick your brain about the oral interview process, and if I may have mentioned this before, but Christine is going to be a police applicant as well. So this is pretty cool for her, and she probably has some questions that she wants to ask as well. So
no problem.
Let's start out with Carolyn. How did you get into oral interviews?
Well, when I worked for the Recruitment and Employment Division, we had what we call the oral prep interview that we offered to all candidates that were in the process every month. So it was about a 3-hour ordeal, and we would get a big room and about approximately 50 to 100 people would attend. And we'd do like a little slideshow, projection type thing, and go over about 15 different questions. And the kids really got a lot out of it. Obviously, if you're doing one-on-one, you're going to get a lot more information. So if they attended that oral prep, great. They usually did well. And they needed somebody to run that oral prep interview. And I volunteered because I was one person that interviews, and when I interview, I get very nervous. I can't eat or sleep for a whole week.
Oh,
so
geez.
I have to help these kids because, I got through it, and I know, a lot of the questions, and I know what they're looking for in an answer. So that's how I really got into it, just by offering, my assistance, because they needed somebody to step up because it was in the evening and we'd have to rearrange our schedule. So I started doing that, probably about 10 years ago or more. And I really enjoyed it. So once I retired, when you Ken came to me and suggested that, I was all for it because, that's one of the things that is so important. When you're doing police work, you have to have that command presence. You have to be able to communicate. And that's a lot of our job is communicating. If you can talk somebody to jail, great. I mean, you have to do what you have to do, but talking is ideal. So that's really how I got started. They just needed somebody to run that, and I did so, and I feel like I did it quite well. And here's a fun fact. Since I've retired, every single candidate that I've helped has passed the department interview. So
And
Heck
that,
yeah, that's
doing
awesome.
something right.
yeah. When people call me and say, "Hey, I need help with the oral interview," and I tell them I got the person for you, and she's got 100% pass rate for people that I send to her for the oral interview, and we're going to give your information out a little later, and so that will tell people how to get a hold of you. So as far as the oral interview and the oral interview, I'll tell you one thing I remember is that the oral interview, if you can't pass the oral interview, you stop right there. That's the end of the journey for that moment.
Right. So you pass. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly right.
And there's so many people. I remember one candidate that he failed the oral interview, and then the second time he went in there, and no kidding, this is no joke. He went in, and his life experience was band camp, and he literally talked about band camp. So that whole thing about one time at band camp, he did that. And so I was talking with him, and I don't know who he talked to, but he went out and got some life experience, volunteered at the police station, and passed the third one. And I think he's got 14 years on, but it took him 3 tries, Carolyn, to pass that oral interview. But I think if you had been there back then doing the mentoring, I think he would have saved himself 2 oral interviews. So
maybe because it's weird that I can talk to somebody over the phone, and literally in about a minute I can tell whether or not they're going to struggle with that department interview or not.
oh my,
Right.
So,
well this
So-
go ahead.
no, so I'm just saying. So it just takes a really good listener, and obviously being able to have some correct answers. So I still have people that work in recruitment, and they're my long life friends, and I call them about once a month. Let me know, is there any changes? No changes. And, if there is, they call me ahead of time. I don't even have to ask. So it's kind of nice because we want the kids to do well. We want good officers. And if they're seeking help, that really means that they really want the job. So this is why it makes you feel so good when they pass. You're like, yes.
Right.
Well, just a quick note for the people that are in the Facebook Live with us. We won't be able to get to your questions right away, but we'll give you an opportunity to ask Carolyn any questions that may be on your mind. We're going to go through some things first, and then we're going to open it up to questions for the Facebook Live. So we have candidates that are listening with us live right now that I'm sure they'll want to pick your brain and ask some questions as well, Carolyn. So we'll get to that in a little bit.
Okay.
Christine, do you want to go ahead and start us out with some questions here for Carolyn?
Yeah, I think a couple of the things that we had talked about, I think I'm kind of hearing a little bit of feedback, that we were kind of wondering about is what are a couple pitfalls that typically lead to people failing interviews? I know that you just mentioned like a kid talked about band camp and didn't have a lot of life experience, but I guess just common pitfalls that would lead to interview failure.
Well, one of the things that I think is real important, obviously, is if you speak with confidence. So, for example, if you are in the interview and you're very soft-spoken and they can't actually quite hear you, then you're not going to pass. Because I did have a candidate like that, and I was sitting across from him, and I said, I can't hear you. You need to speak up. And he tried to speak up, but he just couldn't. And so I was like, I got to send him home and do some homework and give him some, interview techniques to help him pass. So that, you have to speak with confidence, and you have to actually answer the question, and they actually have to hear you. So that's one pitfall that I think is very important, that you make sure they hear you and you answer the question. So, and another one is, if they ask you a question and you answer yes or no and you just leave it at that, that is not enough. You have to elaborate. You have to actually give them an example. You have to let them know that you're able to communicate, because you have about 15 minutes to determine, they have about 15, 20 minutes in that interview to determine whether or not you're going to be a good officer out there. And if you're unable to communicate with them right then and there, they're going to lead to believe that you need a little more time, you need a little more practice, and you're not going to pass because they don't think that you're communicating well. So those are the ones that I feel are real important.
I think it's interesting that you mentioned that too, is because, I mean, you think about, you could have all the right answers. You could elaborate well and articulate well, but if they can't hear you, then none of that matters. And it does tell you a lot about it. It does tell you a lot about a candidate, because I mean, yeah, if they're out on the street trying to do this job, then if people can't hear them, that's not going to do any good there either. So I think that's definitely a common pitfall. Maybe I would guess.
I tell people, if you're quiet and shy, don't be quiet and shy in that interview, because you're not going to be quiet and shy when you're out there in the field. It's just a little bit of nervousness, and once you point that out to somebody, you'd be surprised how well they do. There's another thing. Let's say everybody has mistakes in their interview. Nobody's perfect. So you walk away thinking, oh, I should have said this. But that's okay. That just means, that you want to do better. And one of the things that I've noticed that people will do sometimes, like this one candidate, he would say in between each pause. And I said, I'm counting your ums, and there was about 13 of them. And he said, yeah, that's part of my conversation, me and my girlfriend. I said, no, instead of saying hold that pause, just pause. I said, because when somebody's talking like that and they stop talking, you're kind of like, what is she going to say next? It's just an attention, it grabs their attention. It's an attention getter. So utilize that. Instead of you hold your pause and then, say what you have to say. And that true. Alone really would help. Yeah. So those are, a couple of secrets. I do have a couple other techniques that I use. And, for the people that will utilize my services, they'll get that information. But yeah, those are the ones that I feel though are very important, what you call the pitfalls. Yeah.
Very cool. Go ahead, Ken.
I was going to give everybody a fun fact about Ken. Carolyn, I failed my sheriff's interview in 1979. You did? Yeah, I sucked. I hate. That makes me feel so good. No, the oral interviews.
I know you speak so well.
I don't like oral interviews, because to me it's a show thing where you got to go. They know that you're going in there, and it's not. Yeah. To impress them, and hopefully you'll pass. But I didn't know that. Nobody showed me how to do it. So I failed it. I failed the oral interview, and then I took the LAPD one and passed that one. I'm just not an interview person.
I think it's good. Well, and I'm glad that you share the fun fact, though, because I'm sure that's reassuring. It's reassuring for people that may find themselves in that position. So it's good to see that, success stories, even though they've failed or even though they've been through it and learned from it, that you can come back and it's doable. So I think that's reassuring and important that you share that with people. Because like I said, it makes me feel better. If that were to happen to me, I would want to know that other people have been there too. So.
Carolyn, one thing I wanted to touch bases with you on is during the COVID thing. Is there anything the candidates need to keep in mind during COVID? Because it's usually you walk in there and you shake hands and all that. And some of them, I think, are they doing them on Zoom sessions, or is it still in person?
Right now, LAPD is doing the Zoom interviewing. But it's funny that you say that, because I was thinking about that. And one of my other candidates is from out of state, and he said that they're going to be doing an interview in person. And he asked me about, shaking their hand. I said, no, at this time of year, I don't suggest that you shake their hand, because the interviewers are different, just like everybody. We're all different and unique in our own ways. And some people are very, self-conscious about their hands and touching things because of COVID-19. And, we're trying to get away from handshaking, and they're telling you fist bumps and elbows. So I told them, at the end, you're going to thank them for your time and, utilize your closing statement or whatever it is that you have to say, and tell them, fortunately, I know we're not supposed to be shaking hands through the COVID, but you can do the elbow or the fist bump. If not, That's fine. I'll wait to hear from you. And, having that confidence to bring that up is going to be impressive to them as well, because you don't want to reach and shake somebody's hand that is totally against it and, actually offend them. So my suggestion is don't shake their hand and let them know why. You don't want them to think it's because you're rude, but we all know we're supposed to be, wearing masks and staying 6 feet apart and not, shaking hands. So, yeah, that's one thing that I've recently had to, change up and tell my candidates, don't shake the hand.
So even post COVID, when there's no COVID anymore, is the protocol?
Fingers crossed.
is the protocol to you reach your hand out first, or you wait for prompting from the proctors?
I tell my candidate as when they're leaving and they're telling them their closing statement to go ahead and be confident enough to shake their hand. When you reach out to shake their hand, they are going to shake their hand. And if they don't, that's just weird.
I think that's kind of a good segue into another question we talked about too, is because I think that initiating the handshake as a candidate, that's something that they're probably looking for. Is if you don't shake their hand, that might be something like that might be a strike against you or whatever. But it's interesting.
It shows that you're confident. Yeah.
Right.
And it shows a confident. Yeah.
Yeah. Shows that you thought about it too. And the whole Zoom interview thing is funny because it's kind of crazy because I feel like it introduces a whole different host of things to worry about, or like different, there's a whole different like set of tips that can kind of help you with a Zoom interview, because it is a little bit more detached than being in person. So it can be harder to make an impression, I would think. Yeah. On a Zoom interview.
I think you're right. Because my other candidate that was doing the interview via Zoom, I told him, okay, so you're still going to be sitting in the chair and you want to scoot all the way back so you sit up nice and tall, because you want them to see, that you're ready for the interview, you're respectful, you're just nice and prepared. So those are things that you don't really think about when you're practicing, even in a live interview. But if you're more lax at home and via Zoom, I would imagine that it'd be really easy to kind of, shrug your shoulders or, kind of kick back. You don't want to do that.
Right. So you're in a more comfortable environment.
Right. Yeah. So it is kind of a little strange for somebody like me that's, older and has always done the face-to-face. And some kids that are, recently interviewing, it's just the way it is and they're comfortable with it. So I'm just glad I'm not out there.
Carolyn, I have a curiosity question for me. This comes up quite a bit. How does candidates need to show command presence and to come across as being confident, but then there's a line that they can cross where they sound arrogant. How do they prevent that?
Well, I've had a couple of candidates that they've had that borderline arrogance, and if you're arrogant, I think you kind of know. So then you're going to have to work on it to kind of tone it down a bit, because it could come off a little arrogant if you're like, showboating. But I think it would be really hard for somebody that is arrogant, to not be arrogant. So it's upon them to really, seek help. And if I'm talking to somebody and I feel that, I'll actually tell them, yeah, that's a little too bold. You don't want to say that. You don't want to do that. So when I go over the questions with them, I'm actually interviewing them so I can hear what they're saying, and I'll tell them, okay, we don't want to say that because that sounds a little too, political or whatever it is. So it's really about you being respectful. So if you're arrogant, you need to be respectful, because that'll take away, that arrogancy if you always remember to be respectful.
I think it's good that you point that out to them if they're coming to you for help, because not only does it help them pass an interview, but it's a reality check for somebody to maybe like, here's a dose of humility. Like that kind of goes a long way. Not even just in terms of passing an interview, but just long term. I mean, in that career, you don't want to kind of be too overbearing or arrogant. You know, you want to have a sense of confidence for sure, but you don't want to be that overzealous type of arrogance about you.
They kind of ask you that too. They ask you in the department interview with LAPD, you know, has anybody ever given you corrective criticism? And if so, how did you handle it? So they want to hear about your life experiences, and they want to know that you can actually handle something like that, because this is a controlled environment. And when you're out in the patrol world, it's not controlled. You're going to have a bunch of people doing a lot of different things. And if you can't handle this little controlled environment, then it's going to be difficult for you to be out there. So that's the whole reason why they interview and they ask you, you know, your life experiences, what have you done, and, you know, just different things. So I think it's a good thing to have the department interview. So I'm just thankful that I'm able to actually, you know, talk to candidates and help them before, because I know I'm super nervous when I interview. And if I knew all the questions, hey, that'd be great.
Yeah. I think too, not even just, you mentioned speaking too quietly, but people that tend to be nervous in an interview, which is common and understandable, but like eye contact would be a big thing too, correct?
Yeah. Yeah. Eye contact, sitting nice and straight, you know, not too many hand gestures, because they're going to be asking you a question. If you can't look at them, they're going to probably assume that you're not being truthful. So yeah, that is important. The eye contact, definitely. Yeah, I'm glad you asked that.
A lot of like nonverbal cues, I guess, that they look for too, not just the right answer, but the nonverbal cues that they're looking for also. So that's important.
Let me interject here for just a second. If you guys want to get a hold of Carolyn for your oral interview prep, her phone number is 626-327-2335, 626-327-2335. And for those of you that are in the Facebook Live, we're going to get to your questions here in just a little bit. Some of you folks did not sign up in the Facebook where it tells you we can see your name. So some of the comments we're seeing are just Facebook user instead of names. So we're going to get to these questions here in just a second. We have one of our listeners that actually has a oral interview coming this Thursday. So this is really good for them to be here. Anyways, Christine, go ahead.
Oh, next question.
Yeah.
Let me pull up our outline again. One of the things that I'm sure, I know that this was probably one of the comments that came through on Facebook. One of our listeners has this question also. It's like probably the main question that anybody would want to ask. But what are some of the most commonly asked questions that they heavily focus on? And I guess what would be some of the answers that they would be looking for in response?
Well, one of the first questions, I believe, kind of sets the pace. So I always tell my candidates, I want you to nail that first question. Normally it's, tell me a little about yourself, or why do you want to be a police officer?
Yeah.
So we want each and every person to speak from the heart, because every single person is unique, like I said, in their own way, right? There's only one you. So you have to let them know, you know what you're getting into, you know a little bit about the department, and the love that you have for the desire to be a police officer. So, for example, if I have a candidate that's, a little quiet and shy and wants to, be a police officer, then I have another candidate who's not as quiet and shy, and he or she wants to be a police officer as well. And let's say he or she did a little bit of homework, comes into the interview and says, I'm really eager to be a police officer. I've always wanted to be a police officer since I was in kindergarten. I've looked into the department. I see that, LAPD is the first, to do one of many. It was the first, LAPD was the first agency to have females with powers of arrest, which was Alice Wells in 1910. She served 30 years. Okay, so he has some knowledge. He has some facts. And, he goes on, and then this other person interviewing is, I, really want to be a police officer, I've been wanting to be a police officer for many years now, and the pay is good, and I know that, the benefits are good as well. So that's why I want to be a police officer. So that's fine what they said, but they need to elaborate a little bit more, show that they're really interested because they did a little homework. They know how many, sworn officers there are, how many square miles LAPD patrols. Those kind of things are important. And if they ask you who the chief of police is, you better know who the chief of police is. And if you didn't do your research, or you didn't do a little bit of research, you're not going to know. So that first question, you're going to know about yourself, but you really have to give them a little of yourself. Speak from the heart. Make it interesting, because you don't want to lose your audience. You want them to be interested. And if you have something to share and it's about you, it's going to be interesting because they've never heard it before.
Mm.
Yeah.
So
that's important.
Can I, do they really ask, what would you do if you stopped your mother?
Some agencies do, yes. And that's funny. This kid, about 2 weeks ago, he said that one of his buddies called him and said, they asked you that question. Ask Zavala about that. And I said, you know what? You better, I would say, yes. If my mom is doing something erratic, yes, I'm going to write her a ticket, because I know that she's not going to do it again. And we don't want officers that are going to bend the law. So it would have to be, okay, is she doing something like, okay, she forgot to, put her blinker on when she, made that lane change? Or was she speeding and nearly, running over somebody? It's different if it's, just a tiny something mistake. But, it's just, I would imagine that they want somebody to be realistic. And I'm such a square, I probably would give my mom a ticket. So it's all about how you can handle it. Yeah. My mom,
Sorry, I was just gonna say, if that was my mom, I'd probably just tell him, like, I'd call somebody else and let them handle it, because you don't want to get caught in that situation.
Oh man. Another question I have, and I hear this is the wrong thing to do. When oral boards ask a candidate, why do you want to work for us? Is the incorrect answer, because I want to help people. I've always wanted to help people.
You know what? It's not that it's incorrect, Ken. It's just too vague, and you have to be, honest and unique. And if that's the truth, you want to, elaborate a little bit about it and explain what that means to help people. I'm the type of person, that if I pass the class and I get the best grade, I want to help this other person, do the same. There's not that many people like that are willing to give all their secrets away. But there are those few people like myself and you, Ken, that want to help others. And if you share a little bit and go in depth, then you can actually say that in a different way. But you have to remember, when it says to protect and serve, have that on the side of the car. They already know. So you want to just utilize different words rather than saying help people. Explain the type of person you are and why you want to do it. So it's not like, oh, it's wrong, but it is kind of, because it's too simplified, I guess.
Yeah, you haven't elaborated or articulated anything specific, I guess.
Right, yeah.
Are oral interviews across the board generally the same from here, from, say, California to New York? Are they generally the same type of format and everything?
There are some similar questions, but they're not exact, obviously, because, different things going on in their community and that kind of thing. So what I tell my candidates do that are out of state, I say, I don't know every single question each state is going to offer. But when you work with me and we go over these questions, and if you find some questions, let's talk about them. So that's what I've done before. I give them some questions, they do their homework, and they answer the questions I give them. And then they'll say, well, these are the ones that I know that they're going to ask me. They're asking me, tell me about the city of Tustin, let's say. And And I tell them, you got to do your homework. You got to know what you're getting yourself into. And that'll kind of answer most of the questions there. So they're not always the same, but they're very similar.
Mm. And I don't know if we covered this. Did we cover the first question, Christine, about what are some of the pitfalls that lead to failure?
Yeah, she mentioned that it was, speaking too quietly or not making eye contact.
Right.
And that was kind of like a lot of the, or not having life experience. And that kind of
unable to answer the question. Yeah.
Right. And that kind of led into like nonverbal cues that they're looking for. And I know that some people have added some questions in here too at the end that we can ask.
Right.
But I think in terms of like, it kind of those common questions of why do you want to be a police officer? Why do you want to work here? Tell us about yourself is kind of the very open-ended question, which should be easy to answer, but it's so hard to answer because it's not specific at all. It's dumping everything on you, and you need to be prepared for that because they're not directing the question towards anything specific. So you kind of have to lead that. But what are some of the other, I guess, typical questions that you've seen asked or that you've seen applicants struggle with?
You know, one of the questions that I feel is the hardest question to answer is, what is your greatest accomplishment in life thus far?
That is so hard.
It's so hard, but you know, you'd be surprised. I had this one kid, he was, had 10 siblings. He said, well, the only thing he's done is graduate from high school.
10 siblings.
And I said, okay. But it's not, just that. It's what obstacles did you have to overcome to graduate from high school? And I'm telling you, this kid, he was the eldest of 10. His mom and dad were older. They couldn't do everything. So not only did he have to go to school, he had to work to help the family, support the family. Plus, he helped raise the kids. He helped them with their homework because the mom and dad didn't speak English. He had to help each and every one of these kids with their homework, make sure, they got their dinner and they all helped with that, bathes and stuff, baths. And it was just a struggle because of the type of person he was and everything he did to help the family. I said, that's your greatest accomplishment, and you're going to tell them exactly how you had to handle this little situation with helping your parents. So, like I said, it's just what you had to do to get there.
Yeah,
Not,
I think
it's just this. No, I had to do all this to get there.
Right. Graduating high school, I think like it takes it from saying like, oh, my greatest accomplishment is graduating high school versus my greatest accomplishment. Yeah, it completely changes the game when you explain what it was that it took for you in order to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But it's funny that you say that because I'm the youngest of 11 kids. So I was like, whoa, it's like such a coincidence.
Carolyn, how personal should people get with their own stories during the oral interview? Is it possible to get too personal? Like my parents got divorced and I messed up in school. I mean, can you get too personal? Or do you get personal at all during the oral interview?
Well, I tell the candidates when you have to, when you're answering a question and you're going to share your experience, it is going to be personal. So as long as you're not talking for, more than 2 minutes on each question, it can get too long. So I always tell them 1 to 2 minutes is your answer. And if it's something that's happening or happened to you, it's obviously going to be interesting because it's new to the interviewer. But I don't think that there's anything other than, some of the things that we don't talk about. I don't know. When they say, what is your greatest accomplishment in life this far? You don't want to say, having kids, getting married, those kind of things. But personal things that happen to you are important because it shows who you are and how you handled the situation. That's the reason they want to know about you, is because they want to know that you've actually had some experiences and can deal with this irate customer or this, brother who's, verbally abusive. What did you do? Did you get all crazy and beat him down? Or did you talk to him and come to, a rational decision? So it is important, to share your, obviously your experiences that have good outcomes. You don't want to,
Yeah.
if you're this violent person and you beat somebody down and you got arrested, well, you're not going to be, suitable for a police officer because of that. But yeah, you need to be personal.
Okay. Yeah. One thing that really, I guess, I find irritating about the oral interview is that because I hate them. I hate oral interviews.
Yeah.
But my question is, why are they so freaking important? What's the big deal about these oral interviews, man? Because you could be stopped in your tracks with the oral interview. Why are they so important?
Well, like I said, they want to make sure that you're going to be able to handle, the communication that you got to provide out in the patrol field. You're going to have, a 6'5", guy on PCP charging at you, and on the other hand, you're going to have this small child who's a victim. Are you going to be able to, change your voice and not be so, driven, and you're going to lower your voice and, be a little bit more empathetic to the small child or victim who's crying, as opposed to, this other person that you're going to have to really raise your voice, use your command presence. So it's important because they want to see if you're able to handle all these little and big things coming your way. If you don't have any life experiences, then you're probably not ready.
Yeah.
I mean, I hate them too, Ken. I really do, but I don't know.
I think too, it's a really good way. It's a really good way for them to measure your ability to handle stressful situations, which is literally the vast majority of what police officers are tasked with doing. Stressful situations. So I think that that's a good way for them to see that. So.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think you're right.
One of our listeners on Facebook Live, Donika, I don't know, is it Donika or Donika? But anyway.
Yeah, I was wondering.
Yeah, she says I have a quiet, raspy voice. So is it okay? Or should you fake your voice and try and have more command presence?
No, I think your voice is nice, Ken. It's not too low. It's perfect, but being able to let them hear you, is important, because you will have to raise your voice sometimes when you're out there in the field. You're not going to have to do that in the department interview, but I wouldn't suggest changing your voice, but just, allowing them to know, like you said, are you going to be able to handle the stress? Are you going to be able to communicate? These questions aren't very hard questions. They're about you. What makes it difficult is you want to do well and you're nervous. So, that's what makes this interview so difficult. It's just that you want it so bad. And it's difficult to put some things into words sometimes. So the more you practice, the better you get. I tell people, all these answers you have, now you look in the mirror and you ask yourself these questions and you answer them. That way you can see what they see. And it really does help.
Yeah.
Practice,
so maybe don't change your voice, but just practice projecting it.
Yeah.
And when they are wrapping up the interview, how would they wrap up the interview?
They usually say, at this time, we are finished with the interview. Is there anything you'd like to add or anything you'd like to ask? And I always tell the candidates, don't ask the question. Just say, I want to thank you for your time, and rest assured, and just go ahead into your closing statement. And then it could be 30 seconds long, no longer than a minute, and then you're on your way. So you want them to know that you're confident enough to give that closing statement. Because the people that are quiet and shy, they don't want to give that closing statement. They're like, oh my God, it's over. Great. I get to leave. No, you got to stick it out for the very last. And let them know you really want this job. Even if you're not going to pay me, I'm still going to do it. Something like that.
Would there be a positive question that maybe they could add? Like, are questions frowned upon? Or sometimes I've heard mixed reviews on that you should ask a question. So I don't know.
I always suggest not to. I've always been taught, and with the LAPD interview, tell your candidates not to ask a question. Just be thankful and give your closing, reiterate, what type of person you are, whoever it is, and give a little closing, not more than 1 minute long, and be done.
Yeah.
But, other agencies might be different, but I don't suggest it.
I know oh, go ahead, Ken.
No, go ahead.
The job I have now, when they asked at the end of the interview, I didn't want to be like caught in my tracks and like seem too nervous to say anything. And so I thanked them for their time. And they asked if I had any questions. And so I asked them, when might I hear back from you, or when might I be able to expect to hear back from you? And then I asked them what they enjoyed about working there. And that seemed to be pretty well received. And it kind of gave me an idea of who they were. Because, I mean, realistically speaking, when you're an interviewer, you're also kind of interviewing them to see if that's a place that you want to work, obviously. So I think that was a good question. But I think, just like you said, depending upon where you're at, their preferences for what they're looking for might be a hair different here to there. So,
that question that you asked, it's actually a nice question. And so if you're going to, have the confidence you have to see and ask that, I say, yes, go for it, because it does make a difference who's saying it and how they say it.
Right.
So that probably did sound good. When you said it, I was like, wow, that is a good question.
Yeah, I definitely would not ask them like, oh, how many people have you shot? Like, don't do that. It's not a good interview question.
Well, Daniqua has a question. Should she practice voice projection?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that's great. It's a good idea.
Or maybe like Daniqua, I was suggesting maybe obviously not changing your voice, but like maybe practice projecting your voice in terms of like speaking louder, or just practicing being able to kind of maybe stand like far away from somebody and pretend like you're giving a presentation and have them give you feedback about whether they can hear you well. I think that they're not going to care what your voice sounds like as long as you're saying what's right. So
right, and if you enunciate, very good. So that's part of it too, enunciating. Because if you're a little soft spoken, you're probably going to know you're a little soft spoken, because people have probably said, "What? I can't hear you." So if you know that you're that type of person, then make sure you raise your voice a little and make sure you enunciate so that you sound clear and they can hear you.
Yeah, that whole command presence will come to you. I remember when my kids were growing up, I'd say something to somebody, or I don't know what it was, and they'd say, "Oh, Dad's using his police voice." And it's like it's like you get into you learn it, but initially for the interview, it's probably a little different, and people may be a little shy. And it is a little bit. It can be overwhelming to be sitting in front of three people, and they all look like they hate your guts because they're trying to intimidate you, right?
I agree, but they're not trying to intimidate, because I have a lot of people that are on the oral board. But I think they do ask a lot of these young kids. When I got hired on, these questions were not as hard. I don't even remember the questions, but if I passed, I know they were easy. So the questions that we give them, they're really making them think about it and expressing themselves and showing who they are. I'm like, wow. And these candidates, they're sharp.
That's good. I'm glad that they're doing that. I was going to say, Ken, nothing police is harder than a dad or a mom.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah. Before we get going here, I appreciate you being here as well. I think we don't have any questions that are waiting. Carolyn, for those of us, I'm putting the phone number on the bottom of the screen here. Again, for the people who are listening on the actual podcast, 626-327-2335. That's Carolyn's direct number. To get a hold of her. Number. Yeah, and you can get a hold of Carolyn anytime. She's really, really good. I've contacted her when candidates have said, "Hey, I'd like to utilize your oral interview prep services," and I said, "Okay, let me text Carolyn." And then, minutes later, the candidates will get back to me and go, "Caroline called me and she's just so cool," and all this kind of stuff. So the folks that I have sent you, they love you. You have a super good personality for what you do. So if you want to get past that oral interview, Carolyn is the person to call. And Carolyn, what is it that you offer them when you do this oral prep?
Well, I talked to them for about maybe 5 minutes, and I explained to them, what I need. I need their email address, and then I email them some questions, and I tell them, this is your homework. They answer the questions. It's usually about 13 questions. And then once they finish it, they'll text me, I finished it, and we'll set up a 1 hour time, and we talk, and I ask them the interview questions, and they answer them. And if I don't like, the answer, or something doesn't sound right, then I say, no, let's not say this. I want you to say this. It's the same thing, but it sounds more positive. So I'll need 1 full hour of their time. And then after that, if they want to call me to congratulate themselves and let me know, that's what I tell them to do. Please let me know if you pass. And that's how I find out if they pass. So I really only need 1 full hour of their time, and usually that's enough.
Yeah,
that's really cool, Carolyn.
I'm confident that if whoever contacts Carolyn, they're going to pass. Daniqua is asking, what's a good time to reach out?
Anytime. I don't go to bed till 1 a.m. because I'm retired, but
don't tell them that. They'll call you at 2.
Yeah. So maybe not past 10 o'clock, but yeah. And if I don't, answer, I'll just call you back and text you and say, I'm available. When can we talk? And then you can call me when you're available. Sometimes, candidates will call me or text me, and then I'll get the text, and they'll say, oh, I was on a break and I won't be off work, for another 2 hours. I said, okay, call me then. So I'm pretty open.
That's great. And if they leave a message, you'll get back to them pretty quick anyways.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. Within a few hours, never longer than a day for sure.
Oh, that's great. Well, this has been a really great experience, and I knew that you would come in with the answers. And so if you guys want to pass that oral interview, if it's important, you only need it to get on the job. It's not,
Yep, you'll find. After that, we'll show you the rest of the stuff in the academy.
Carolyn, it has been a pleasure. I talk to Carolyn probably every 1 or 2, or probably every couple of weeks or so. I send her a candidate. Otherwise, we just kind of keep in touch. But she's enjoying retirement. I'm enjoying retirement. And I do policebackground.net. She does the oral interview. And together, we get people hired.
Yeah,
that's awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much, Carolyn. It was awesome meeting you and awesome talking to you.
Right. It was nice meeting you, Kristen. Take care and good luck.
Good luck. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye.
And we'll thank everybody for being here. And this was our first premiere episode. I love this. This is great. And the folks that are in here commenting and things like that, I appreciate that as well. So thank you guys. We will be back with episode 3. This is episode 2 because the trailer is 1. So episode 3. So thank everybody for being here, and we will talk to you soon.
Thanks for listening to the Police Applicant Podcast. We are the premier police background prep site in the U.S. and Canada. For more information on scheduling your police background consultation, go to policebackground.net. Also, please leave us a review on iTunes.